We are back in the studio. This is the second video from the series about my Eurorack setup. And in the last video, we talked about some basic routings and crafted some drums in the end. If you missed it, you can find a link in the description or at the end of the video. And today we will go back to what we did in the last video first, and then we will move on to the Subbass. I will also show some basic routings and patch examples, so that it will sound something like this in the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, leave a subscription and check out the other videos in my channel. So let's move on. Everything here is actually the same as we left it after the last video, so the only difference is that I have now connected the joystick, which was previously only connected to the one sequencer here, to both sequencers via this connector. So now when I move the joystick, I can pitch the notes on the sequencer and manipulate the drums here. I've also connected the clock that we connected to the multiplier in the last video to the voltage block and the quad LFO. Yes, now let's just listen in. Okay, those were the drums, and now let's extend them a little and add a bit of variation in the hi-hats first. So I duplicated the steps from 16 to 64. And now let's try adding a crash cymbal to the first beat by changing the notes of the hi-hat track so that other samples on the distinct are triggered. Now we have a bit of variation in the hi-hat. In this case we have an open and a closed hi-hat, a crash cymbal, and all are triggered by one track only by changing the notes on the sequencer. That of course saves a bit of cable mass and gear.
That's a lot, right?
Now let's have a look at the snare drum. Yeah, the roll is quite cool here. So let's just use it. Maybe we'll try a different one for the second snare. No, that was actually not so good. We leave it like it was, I think. Anyway, there are enough variations, I think, to get an idea of how this works. So much for the drums now, we've already covered them in the last video, so now it's time for the sub-bass. I'm using the Döpfer envelope to control the gates for the sub-bass. And I need a few long cables for now. Maybe a little anecdote in between. I'm also a sound engineer and work a lot with cables in all shapes and colors, and I love cables. But on the other hand, I also... it's kind of a love-hate relationship, because somehow they always have to be tidy and out of the way, and of course that's very difficult, especially here with the modular synthesizer. Nevertheless, I always try to lay my cables very neatly, and so that the mess doesn't get any bigger than it already is. I try to lay all the cables that go to the side on the bottom, and the cables that go up are on top of it. And I try to keep the shortest cable as possible. So the sequencer is connected to the pitch of the disting, and the envelope is connected to the VCA. And now let's connect the disting out to the VCA. Sort the cables. And now everything is patched up, and that's the bass. For those of you who are interested, I have compared the sine waves of all my oscillators, for especially the WMD, the analog oscillators, or the piston Honda, or even the disting. And the more analog the oscillators, the more overtones the sine waves have. And the digital sine waves from the disting, in this case, is actually the one with the fewest harmonics in my eyes and the cleanest sine wave. So I'm using the disting now for the sub-bass. There is a mode here on the disting, or there are some modes where you can get a bit of distortion to the sine wave. And in this case more overtones. What I also like to do is to connect the out of the second Döpfer envelope, which by default is triggered by the first, to the FM input of the disting. And since the disting has no attenuator, I use the Levit 8 to connect it between the envelope and the FM input of the this thing. And then I can control the pitch drop of the bass sound. A bit more decay. And a bit more mount. So we get a bit more of this pitch drop effect. A bit like a kick drum. Yeah, that's our Subbass for today. In the next episode we are looking into the mid-range and melody stuff. And if you liked the video, I would be happy if you leave a subscription, a comment or a like. And until the next video.